Apple was founded on April 1st, 1976 by Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak. Their main focus was making computers that were small enough for people to use in their homes and in their offices. The company started in Jobs' garage with the Apple I. After this, the Apple II revolutionized the computer industry with colored graphics, which were never seen before. Then, in 1980, Apple decided to go public, causing their sales to skyrocket by almost $110 million. At this point, Apple had only sold computers since they were founded in 1976. However, in 1997, Steve Jobs and Apple began developing their version of the MP3 player, the iPod, along with the most popular media player software of all time, iTunes. On June 1st, 2007, Steve Jobs released the first ever iPhone after asking Apple's engineers to look into developing touchscreen devices and tablet computers. A year after this, Steve Jobs recognized how many issues there were with the iPhone and fixed them with the release of the iPhone 3G. The phone appeared to be faster, cheaper, available in more countries, compatible with third-party apps, and more suited for business. Since then, Apple has released almost 20 versions of the iPhone. With each release, the iPhone also comes with newer features and better specs. With more upgrades in iPhones throughout the years, Apple has also developed features that are Apple specific, such as FaceTime and iMessage, two of the biggest features Apple has ever released that continue to draw in customers and give an advantage over competitors, such as Samsung and Google. The manufacturing that Apple uses is inconsistent with their image. Child labor is not just an issue in their factories. The minerals that Apple uses in their products, such as cobalt, are being mined by children. Cobalt is an essential ingredient in smartphones, but it is at a global shortage. Apple plans to go straight to the source and secure it directly from the mines. But investigations into cobalt mines in recent years have repeatedly revealed incidents of child labor in these hazardous work conditions. In 2010, Apple openly admitted to using child labor for the first time. Since 2012, Apple says it has reduced the number of underage workers in its extended supply chain, which includes locations where rare earth metals are mined for the use in smartphones. In 2017, Apple manufacturing plants partnered with a high school in China requiring students to work 11-hour days. This was part of a graduation requirement which violated Chinese laws for student interns. A year later, Apple admitted that its biggest manufacturing partner was employing school kids in China to meet demand for the iPhone X. Students who ranged in age from 17 to 19 had been required to work at the plants for at least 3 months in order to complete what was being billed as a work experience graduation requirement. Students claimed they were forced to work there, made to assemble 1,200 iPhone X cameras per day, and that the job had nothing to do with their studies. Apple acknowledged that they were aware of the students working overtime, but that the students had worked voluntarily, were compensated, and provided benefits. Despite these awful things, in 2017, Apple also reported to have stopped buying cobalt mined by hand in Congo following reports of child labor and dangerous work conditions. In 2017, Apple also released their most recent environmentally responsibility report, the company making a bold promise to eventually create a closed-loop supply chain where products are built using only renewable resources and recycled materials. While the company positioned this way as a way to help save the environment, the announcement may also be related to the recurring accusations that Apple keeps supply chain costs low through the hidden use of child labor. Some of the HRM topics related to this case were culture, the way the organization operates both officially and unofficially, levels, the behaviors and values and beliefs of the company, assumptions, the shared beliefs about how things are done and why, and lastly, labor shortage, which is when an organization has fewer employees than it needs. One of the first laws that comes to mind when discussing child labor is the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938. This law states that 18-plus-year-olds can work anytime, anywhere. 16 to 17-year-olds can only work in non-hazardous work environments. And 14 to 15-year-olds can only work 3 hours per day on school days, 8 hours per day on non-school days, a maximum of 40 hours per week, and lastly, they can only work between 7 a.m. and 7 p.m. Ironically, there is already a solution in place to stop child labor in the supply chains for consumer electronics, which is the U.S. Tariff Act of 1930. This law states that all goods, wares, articles, and merchandise mined, produced, or manufactured wholly in part in any foreign country by convict, forced, or indentured labor shall not be entitled to entry at any of the ports in the United States. In 1993, the Bureau of International Labor Affairs was created to respond to a congressional request to investigate and report on abusive child labor. There was an increase in the amount of international child labor violations that were being brought to the surface at this time. The Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2005 was designed to reduce the likelihood of the importation of goods produced by children or slaves. The Trafficking Victims Protection Reauthorization Act of 2013 was passed as an amendment to the Violence Against Women Act, establishing and strengthening programs to ensure that U.S. citizens do not purchase products made by victims of human trafficking and to prevent child marriage. Many companies have had issues with child labor throughout the years. One of the biggest cases of this is Nestle in 2005, when agriculture workers reported to authorities that children were being used in the fields. In 2016, Nestle was finally charged for their wrongdoing. Other companies include Nike, L'Oreal, Sony, Samsung, Microsoft, and Lush. Moving forward, Apple clearly needs to fix their child labor issue. Child labor currently affects the lives of 150 million children worldwide, and the United States has such a strict stance against child labor, but in many other countries it is used to have a cheap labor instead of having to raise the pay for older workers in these factories. Many children have to work in factories because their parents either do not have enough money to pay for food and rent, or the fact that many parents do not have the money necessary to allow their children to receive a quality education to better themselves. After promising so many times that they were ending their child labor in their supply chains, Apple needs to work really, really hard to make sure that this issue never happens again. Although they have not fixed the issue in other parts of the world, Apple is currently setting up a program in China that states if an underage child is found working in one of the factories, they make the supplier return the child to their home, pay for their education, and pay for their basic needs until they are of working age. They also must offer re-employment after the child finishes school. With that being said, if Apple really wants to make a difference, they need to instill this program everywhere, not just in China. Apple uses mines across the world for their minerals that go into their smartphones, and they need to make sure that child labor is being eliminated there as well.